The rain hammered against the windows of Café Lombardi with relentless persistence, each droplet racing down the glass like tears on a stranger's face. It was 10:47 p.m. on a Thursday in late October, and the streets of Little Italy were slick with water that reflected the amber glow of vintage street lamps. Inside the small restaurant, Maya Torres moved between tables with practiced efficiency, her dark hair pulled back in a practical bun, her apron stained with marinara sauce and espresso. "Table 6 needs their check," called out Tony from behind the bar, his thick Brooklyn accent cutting through the ambient noise of clinking dishes and muted conversation. At 72, Tony had owned Café Lombardi for 40 years, and he ran it with the same stubborn dedication that had kept the place alive through economic downturns, changing neighborhoods, and the slow death of authentic Italian establishments in Manhattan. Maya nodded, forcing a smile she didn't feel. Her feet ached from the double shift. She'd been here since 11 that morning covering for Sandra, who'd called in sick. Again. Not that Maya could complain. She needed every hour, every tip, every dollar. The medical bills from her father's cancer treatment still arrived like clockwork, even though he'd been dead for 8 months. $18,000 in debt didn't disappear just because the patient did. She delivered the check to table 6, a young couple celebrating an anniversary. They left her a decent tip, 20%, small mercies. As she cleared their plates, Maya glanced at the clock. 13 minutes until closing. Her mother expected her home by midnight to help with her younger brother's homework. Miguel was struggling with algebra, and their mother's English wasn't strong enough to help him navigate the American school system. The front door chimed. Maya looked up reflexively, ready to apologize and explain they were closing soon. The words died in her throat. 3 men entered, their expensive wool coats darkened with rain. The one in front was younger than she expected, maybe late 30s, with sharp features and eyes the color of cold steel. He wore his dark hair swept back, and even from across the room Maya could sense something dangerous in the way he carried himself, controlled, deliberate, like a knife sliding quietly from its sheath. The restaurant fell silent in a way that made Maya's skin prickle. Tony straightened behind the bar, his weathered face going carefully neutral. The last 4 customers, an elderly couple and 2 business associates, suddenly discovered urgent reasons to leave. Within 90 seconds, they'd paid their checks and disappeared into the rainy night, not one of them making eye contact with the 3 men who now stood just inside the entrance. "Tony," the young man said, his voice smooth and quiet. Not a greeting, an acknowledgement. "Mr. Russo," Tony replied, wiping down the bar with hands that trembled slightly. "We were just closing up. We won't be long. It wasn't a request." Dante Russo. Maya had heard the name whispered in the neighborhood, always with lowered voices and cautious glances. The Russo family had been part of Little Italy's landscape for 3 generations, their influence woven into the fabric of the community like dark thread through expensive cloth. She'd never seen him before. People like her existed in a different world than people like him, but recognition came anyway, instinctive and animal. The 2 men with him took positions near the door and the bar, their movements practiced. Dante walked further into the restaurant, his expensive shoes clicking softly against the worn tile floor. His eyes swept across the room with methodical precision, cataloging everything, missing nothing. Then his gaze landed on Maya. She stood frozen near table 6, dirty plates still in her hands, suddenly conscious of her stained apron and the strand of hair that had escaped her bun. His expression didn't change, but something in his focus sharpened. He altered his trajectory, moving toward her with that same controlled grace. "You work here," he said. Not a question. "Yes." Her voice came out steadier than she expected. "We're closing in a few minutes, but I can—" "Sit down." Maya blinked. "I'm sorry?" "Sit down," Dante repeated, gesturing to the nearest booth. His tone remained conversational, almost polite, but there was steel underneath. This was a man accustomed to immediate obedience. Maya set down the plates carefully and slid into the booth, her heart beginning to hammer against her ribs. Dante sat across from her, and one of his associates, a thick-necked man with a scar along his jawline, positioned himself nearby. The second man remained by the entrance. From his inner coat pocket, Dante withdrew a folded piece of paper. The paper was cream-colored, expensive-looking, with a faint watermark visible even in the dim restaurant lighting. He placed it on the table between them, his fingers. She noticed his hands were immaculate, nails precisely trimmed, smoothing out the creases. "Can you read this?" he asked. Maya looked down at the paper, The handwriting was elegant, old-fashioned, written in dark ink, but the words themselves were unfamiliar, though something about their structure tugged at her memory. "I don't," she started. "In Sicilian," Dante interrupted, his gray eyes fixed on her face with uncomfortable intensity. "Can you read Sicilian?" The question caught her off guard. Maya's mind raced. How could he possibly know? She'd never advertised her knowledge of the dialect. Her grandmother, her Nonna Rosa, had raised her until she was 12, speaking almost exclusively in the ancient Sicilian dialect from her village near Palermo. After Nonna Rosa passed away, Maya had rarely used the language. It wasn't standard Italian, wasn't something that came up in her daily life as a waitress in Manhattan. Yes, she admitted carefully. "My grandmother taught me, but I haven't spoken it in years." "Read it." Dante pushed the paper closer to her. Out loud. Maya's hands trembled slightly as she picked up the note. Behind the bar she could see Tony watching, his face pale. The scarred man near their booth stood perfectly still, his expression unreadable. The only sound was the rain against the windows and the hum of the ancient refrigerator behind the counter. She looked down at the elegant script and began to translate, her grandmother's voice echoing in her memory, teaching her the old words, the proper pronunciations. "Marco Bellini has been feeding information to the FBI for 6 months. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Maya's voice faltered as she processed what she'd just read aloud. She looked up from the paper, suddenly aware that she'd stepped into something far more dangerous than she could have imagined. Dante's expression hadn't changed. He still watched her with that same calculating intensity, but his stillness had taken on a predatory quality. "Continue," he said softly. Maya's mouth went dry. She wanted to push the paper away, to stand up and run out into the rain and never look back. But Dante's eyes held her pinned like a butterfly to a board. She looked back down at the note, her voice barely above a whisper as she translated the next line. "He wears a wire to every meeting. His handler is Special Agent Jennifer Morrison, FBI Organized Crime Division. They have recordings of the Brooklyn warehouse transaction, the Port Newark shipment, and the conversation at Gino's restaurant on October 8th. As Maya read, she became aware of movement in her peripheral vision. A fourth man had entered the restaurant. She hadn't even heard the door chime. He was older than Dante, maybe 50, with salt and pepper hair and an expensive watch that caught the light. His face had gone ashen. "Dante," the man said, his voice rough with an emotion Maya couldn't quite identify. Fear? Desperation? "Whatever you've heard, shut up, Marco." Dante didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The command carried absolute authority. Marco Bellini, the name from the note. Maya's stomach lurched as she realized what she'd just done. She'd exposed a traitor, in front of the traitor himself. "Keep reading," Dante told her, still not looking away from her face. Maya's hands shook harder now, the paper rustling. He was turned after the FBI threatened to prosecute his son for the assault charge from last year. They offered immunity for his son in exchange for his cooperation. He's been providing information since April. "Dante, please, let me explain." Marco took a step forward. The scarred man moved with surprising speed, intercepting Marco and shoving him hard against the wall. The impact rattled the framed photographs of old Sicily that Tony kept hung above the booths. Marco didn't resist, didn't fight back. He just stood there against the wall, breathing hard, his eyes fixed on Dante with something that looked like resignation. "Finish it," Dante said to Maya, his tone unchanged, as if a man hadn't just been slammed into a wall 3 feet away. Maya looked down at the final lines of the note, her voice breaking slightly. "His next scheduled meeting with Agent Morrison is tomorrow, Friday, October 23rd, at 2 p.m. at the coffee shop on Canal Street. He's planning to provide details about the upcoming—" She stopped, the words catching in her throat. "Say it." "About the upcoming meeting with the suppliers from Philadelphia. He's being instructed to wear his wire and get names, dates, and financial specifics." Silence filled the cafe like water filling a sinking ship. Maya set the paper down with trembling hands, unable to look at Marco, unable to look at Dante, her eyes fixed on the scarred wood of the table. She'd just read what amounted to a death sentence. She knew enough about how these things worked, from movies, from neighborhood gossip, from the whispered stories her father used to tell before the cancer took his voice, to understand that Marco Bellini was not going to see tomorrow's meeting. "Who else knows Sicilian in your family?" Dante asked her, his voice cutting through her spiraling thoughts. "What?" Maya looked up, confused by the question. "Who else speaks it?" Your parents? Siblings? No one. Just my grandmother, and she died when I was 12. My mother speaks Spanish and some Italian, but not Sicilian. My little brother only speaks English and Spanish. Dante nodded slowly, as if confirming something he'd already suspected. He looked past her to Tony. How long has she worked here? 3 years, Mr. Russo. Tony answered immediately. Good girl. Hard worker. Never any trouble. Family situation? Tony hesitated, and Maya saw the conflict in his eyes. Loyalty to her versus fear of the man asking questions. Fear won. Her father passed away earlier this year. Cancer. She's helping support her mother and younger brother. Works doubles most weeks. Dante's gaze returned to Maya, and for a brief moment something almost like curiosity flickered in those cold gray eyes. Then it was gone, replaced by calculation. He stood smoothly, retrieving the note from the table and tucking it back into his coat pocket. Luca, he said to the scarred man, take Marco downstairs. We'll discuss his situation privately. No, please, Dante. My son, they threatened my son. Marco's composure finally cracked, his voice rising to a desperate pitch. Downstairs. Dante's voice hardened just slightly, and it was enough. Luca grabbed Marco's arm and began pulling him toward the back of the restaurant, where a door led to the storage basement. Marco went without further resistance, though Maya could see tears streaming down his face. The door to the basement closed with a heavy thud. The third man, still positioned by the front entrance, locked the restaurant's main door and flipped the sign to closed. Maya's heart pounded so hard she could hear it in her ears. She started to stand, needing to move, needing to do something, but Dante held up one hand. Sit down, Maya. The use of her name, which she hadn't given him, sent ice through her veins. Of course he knew her name. He probably knew everything about her already. These people made it their business to know. She sat. Dante remained standing, looking down at her with an expression she couldn't read. You understand what you just did? I read a note, Maya said, then immediately regretted the defensive tone. You told me to read it. You exposed a traitor, a man who was betraying my family, putting my people in danger, risking everything we've built. He paused, tilting his head slightly. Do you know what happens to traitors, Maya? She did. Everyone did. But she couldn't make herself say it out loud. I didn't know what it said, she whispered instead. You just told me to read it. I know, that's why you're still sitting here having this conversation instead of downstairs with Marco. Dante pulled out his phone, checked something on the screen, then pocketed it again. But here's your problem. You now know things. You've seen things. You can identify people. You understand information that could be very dangerous in the wrong hands. I won't tell anyone, I swear. I don't know anything about your business. I don't want to know anything. I just want to go home. It's not about what you want. Dante's voice remained calm, almost gentle, which somehow made it more terrifying. It's about risk management. You're a liability now, a loose end. From somewhere below them, muffled through the floorboards, came the sound of raised voices. Maya flinched. Dante didn't react at all. Please, Maya heard herself say, hating the desperation in her voice but unable to stop it. I have a family. My mother, my brother, he's only 14. They need me. I'm all they have. Something flickered across Dante's face. Not sympathy exactly, but something. Recognition, maybe. He was quiet for a long moment, and Maya could practically see him calculating, weighing options, assessing risks. Finally, he spoke. Don't leave this restaurant. Then he turned and walked toward the back, disappearing through the door to the basement. The third man, still by the front entrance, watched Maya with flat, emotionless eyes. Tony stood behind the bar, looking like he'd aged 10 years in the last 10 minutes. Maya sat in the booth listening to the rain, listening to her own heartbeat, listening to the muffled sounds from below, and wondered if she would ever see her family again. The clock on the wall ticked past midnight. Her mother would be worried. Miguel would be waiting up, probably wanting help with his algebra. The normalcy of those thoughts felt absurd now, like memories from someone else's life. She was trapped in Cafe Lombardi, in a booth that smelled like decades of garlic and tomato sauce, knowing too much, having seen too much, with nowhere to run and no way out. And the night, Maya sensed with terrible certainty, was far from over. The minutes crawled by with agonizing slowness. Maya sat rigid in the booth, her hands clasped together on the table to keep them from shaking. The man by the door, young, maybe 30, with dark eyes and a silver chain visible at his collar, hadn't moved an inch. He stood there like a statue, occasionally glancing at his phone but never taking his attention fully off her. Tony had retreated to the kitchen area, busying himself with unnecessary cleaning. Maya could hear him moving dishes around, the sound of running water, the clatter of pots, nervous energy manifesting in familiar routines. She understood. When the world stopped making sense, you clung to the ordinary. From below, the voices had stopped. That silence was somehow worse than the shouting had been. Maya checked her own phone with trembling fingers. 12:43 a.m. 7 missed calls from her mother. 3 text messages. Mija, where are you? Miguel is waiting for you. He has a test tomorrow. Maya, please answer. I'm worried. She started to type a response, but what could she possibly say? I'm being held in a restaurant by the Mafia because I accidentally exposed a federal informant. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, useless. Put the phone away. Maya's head snapped up. Dante had emerged from the basement door so quietly she hadn't heard him. His expression was unreadable, but she noticed he'd removed his suit jacket. His white shirt was still pristine, sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms that were surprisingly muscular. There was no blood on him. She'd been terrified there would be blood, but something about his demeanor had changed. The calculation in his eyes had sharpened into decision. She put the phone face down on the table. Dante gestured to the man by the door. Nico, wait outside. Make sure we're not interrupted. Nico nodded and slipped out into the rain, taking up a position just outside the front window where Maya could see his silhouette through the glass. Tony, Dante called toward the kitchen. Go home. Tony appeared in the kitchen doorway, wiping his hands on a towel. Mr. Russo, I should stay and go home, Dante repeated, his tone leaving no room for argument. Lock up the kitchen. I'll make sure the front is secured when we leave. Tony's eyes found Maya's for just a second, an apology written in his weathered face. Then he grabbed his coat from the hook by the kitchen entrance and disappeared out the back door. Maya heard the deadbolt slide into place, the rattle of keys, and then she was alone with Dante Russo in the empty restaurant. Dante pulled out the chair across from her and sat down, his movements unhurried. He studied her face with that same unnerving intensity, as if he could read her thoughts written across her features. What's your full name? He asked. Maya Elena Torres. Age? 26. How long have you lived in New York? My whole life. I was born at Mount Sinai Hospital. Dante nodded slowly. Your grandmother? Rosa Torres? Rosa Messina, Maya corrected automatically. She married my grandfather after coming to America, but she kept using her maiden name sometimes. Old-school Sicilian women. What village was she from? The specificity of the question caught Maya off guard. Corleone, near Palermo. Something flickered in Dante's expression. Recognition, perhaps even respect. Corleone, he repeated softly. My grandfather came from Bagheria. Not far. The old families knew each other. Maya said nothing, unsure where this was going. The casual conversation felt surreal given what had just happened in the basement, given the situation she found herself in. Your grandmother taught you Sicilian, Dante continued. Why? Most immigrants wanted their children to speak English to assimilate. She was traditional, Maya explained, her voice quiet. She said the language carried our history, our identity. She didn't want it to die with her generation. So she spoke to me in Sicilian from the time I was born until, her voice caught slightly, until she died. Lung cancer. She smoked those Italian cigarettes her whole life. And after she died, you stopped using it? There was no one left to speak it with. My mother understood a little, but she grew up speaking Spanish. Her family's from Puerto Rico. And my father, she trailed off, the familiar ache of loss tightening her chest. My father was second-generation Italian-American. He understood some Italian, but not the Sicilian dialect. He died 8 months ago, Dante said. Not a question. He already knew. Yes? Cancer as well. Yes. Dante was quiet for a moment, his fingers drumming lightly on the table, the first fidgeting gesture she'd seen from him. And he left you with medical debt. How much? Maya hesitated, then realized there was no point in lying. He probably already knew this too. $18,472 as of last week. You work double shifts here 6 days a week, plus you pick up catering jobs on Sundays through an agency in Chinatown. You make approximately $2,000 a month after taxes. You send $1,400 to cover your family's rent and living expenses, put $300 toward the medical debt, and live on the remaining $300 yourself. He recited the figures with casual precision, as if reading from a mental file. At that rate, it'll take you approximately 5 years to clear the debt, assuming no emergencies, no additional medical expenses, and no interest accumulation, which of course there will be. Maya felt violated by how thoroughly he'd dissected her life, but beneath the anger was something else. A desperate, creeping fear. People didn't gather this level of detail about someone unless they needed it for something. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. "Because I need you to understand your situation clearly." Dante leaned forward slightly, his gray eyes locked on hers. "You're drowning, Maya. You've been drowning since your father died, working yourself to exhaustion just to keep your head barely above water. One unexpected expense. Your brother gets sick, your mother loses her job, you break your arm and can't work, and you go under completely." "I'm managing," Maya said, lifting her chin with what little pride she could muster. "You're surviving. That's not the same thing." He paused, letting that sink in. "And now you have a new problem. A much bigger problem than medical debt." There it was. The reason for all these questions, all this sudden interest in her life. "What happened to Marco?" Maya asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. "Marco made choices. Now he's dealing with the consequences." Dante's expression hardened slightly. "He put my family at risk. He put people I'm responsible for protecting in danger. Because the FBI threatened his son, which I understand. I'm not without empathy. But he should have come to me. I would have protected his son. Instead, he betrayed us." "Is he dead?" The question came out as barely a whisper. Dante held her gaze for a long moment before answering. "No, not yet. That decision hasn't been made." The casual way he said it, "That decision hasn't been made," as if they were discussing a business investment rather than a man's life, sent chills down Maya's spine. "But Marco's situation isn't your concern," Dante continued. "Your concern is what happens to you now. Because you're in an impossible position, Maya. You know things, you've seen things. You can identify me, identify Luca, identify Marco. You know there's an informant in my organization, or was. You know about FBI surveillance, about meetings, about shipments." "I don't understand any of it," Maya protested. "I just read words on a page. I don't know what they mean. I don't know what you do. It doesn't matter what you understand," Dante interrupted gently but firmly. "It matters what you could tell someone if asked. If the FBI comes to you, and they might, especially if Marco disappears, what do you think happens? They pressure you, threaten you, offer you deals. You're already vulnerable because of your financial situation. They could make your life very difficult." Maya's hands clenched into fists on the table. "So what are you saying? What do you want from me?" "I'm saying I have a problem, and you're part of that problem. I can solve it in 2 ways. He held up one finger. "The permanent solution: you disappear. Your family grieves, but they're spared any federal investigation or danger. Clean, simple, no loose ends." Maya's blood turned to ice. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Dante held up a second finger. "Or the complicated solution: you become useful to me. You work for me. You're no longer a liability. You're an asset." "Work for you?" Maya finally found her voice. "Doing what?" "Translation. Communication. I conduct business with people in Sicily and southern Italy, people who speak the old dialects. Sicilian, Calabrese, Napolitano. I have translators for standard Italian, but the old languages, those are harder to find. Especially people who can be trusted, who understand the need for discretion." Maya stared at him, trying to process what he was proposing. "You want me to translate for you? For the Mafia? I want you to help me communicate with my business associates in the language they're most comfortable with," Dante corrected smoothly. "And in exchange, you get protection. You get security. You get your debt paid off. You get your family taken care of. And if I say no?" The question hung in the air between them. Dante didn't answer immediately, and his silence was answer enough. "You're not really giving me a choice," Maya said bitterly. "No," Dante agreed. "I'm not. But I'm giving you something better than a choice. I'm giving you an opportunity. You can stay drowning in debt, working yourself to death for the next 5 years, always one crisis away from complete collapse. Or you can let me solve your problems in exchange for a service only you can provide." "This is insane," Maya whispered. "I'm a waitress. I'm nobody. I don't belong in your world." "You became part of my world the moment you read that note," Dante said. "Whether you want to be or not. Now we're just deciding what your role will be." From below, Maya heard a sound. A muffled thump, then what might have been a groan. Her stomach churned. Somewhere in that basement, Marco Bellini was being held, his fate undecided because she'd read words on a piece of paper. "I want to see him," Maya said suddenly. Dante's eyebrows rose slightly. "Why?" "Because you're asking me to become part of this, whatever this is. I need to understand what that means. I need to see—" She struggled to articulate the thought. "I need to look at what you really do, not just guess from movies and TV shows. If I'm going to make this decision, I need to know the truth." For the first time that night, Dante looked genuinely surprised. He studied her face, that calculating expression back in full force, reassessing her. "You think seeing Marco will help you decide?" "I think if I'm going to work for you, I need to stop being naive about who you are." A ghost of a smile touched Dante's lips, the first she'd seen from him. It didn't reach his eyes. "All right," he said, standing up. "Come with me." Maya's bravado faltered. She hadn't actually expected him to agree, but she stood on shaking legs and followed Dante toward the back of the restaurant, past the kitchen entrance to the heavy wooden door that led to the basement. He opened it, revealing a narrow staircase descending into dim light. The smell hit her first. Dampness, old concrete, and something metallic that might have been blood. "After you," Dante said, gesturing down the stairs. Maya descended carefully, her hand gripping the rough wooden railing. The basement was larger than she'd expected. Clearly it extended beyond just the footprint of the restaurant above. It was filled with the usual restaurant storage: boxes of canned tomatoes, industrial-sized containers of olive oil, wine racks along one wall. But in the far corner, under a single bare bulb, she saw them. Marco sat in a wooden chair, his hands zip-tied behind him. His face was bruised, fresh purple spreading across his left cheekbone, and his lip was split. But he was alive, conscious. Luca stood nearby, arms crossed, watching him with cold, professional detachment. Marco's eyes found Maya as she reached the bottom of the stairs, and something like shame crossed his face. "I'm sorry," he said hoarsely. "I'm sorry you got pulled into this." Maya didn't know what to say. She looked at Dante, who had descended behind her and now stood with his hands in his pockets, perfectly relaxed. "Tell her," Dante said to Marco. "Tell her what you did." Marco's head dropped forward. "I gave them everything. Names, locations, schedules. 3 months of information. My handler said," his voice cracked. "She said if I cooperated fully, if I helped them build their case, they'd protect my son. Tommy's only 19. He made a mistake, got into a fight outside a bar. The other kid ended up in the hospital. They were going to charge him with aggravated assault, maybe attempted murder. 10 to 15 years. He looked up at Maya with red-rimmed eyes. "What would you have done, if it was your brother? If they threatened Miguel?" The question landed like a punch. Maya thought of Miguel, barely 14, struggling with algebra and worried about making the basketball team. If someone threatened him, if someone said she could save him by betraying strangers. "I don't know," she admitted quietly. "That's honest," Dante said from behind her. "Marco's situation is sympathetic, but sympathy doesn't change what he did. He didn't come to me. He didn't trust me to protect his son. He went behind my back, endangered my people, and now 3 operations are compromised. Do you know what happens when the FBI has recordings of our conversations? People go to prison. Families are destroyed. Not just mine, the families of everyone who works for me. Wives, children, parents." Maya turned to look at Dante. "So what are you going to do with him?" "That depends on several factors. How much damage can be contained, whether his information has already been used to build cases, whether Agent Morrison has shared his intelligence with other agencies." Dante's expression was unreadable. "These things take time to determine. And then? And then I make a decision based on what's best for the family." The family. He said it with capital letters, with weight. Not his family in the genetic sense, the family in the organizational sense, the structure that demanded loyalty, that protected its own, that punished betrayal. Maya looked back at Marco, who sat slumped in the chair, defeated, a man who'd made an impossible choice and lost everything anyway. "You see now?" Dante asked her softly, stepping closer. "This isn't movie violence, dramatic shootouts in the street. It's this. It's consequences. It's people making decisions that affect other people's lives. Sometimes those decisions involve compassion. Sometimes they involve brutality. But they're always calculated, always necessary for survival." Maya's legs felt weak. She'd asked to see the truth, and here it was, shabby and brutal, and somehow mundane. A man tied to a chair in a restaurant basement, his face bruised, his future uncertain, while upstairs the rain kept falling and the city kept moving, oblivious. "I need to think," she said. "No," Dante replied. "You need to decide. Now. Because, in about," he checked his watch, 3 hours, people will start asking questions. Your mother will call the police when you don't come home. Tony will wonder if he should open the restaurant. Marco's wife will notice he never came back. Every minute that passes makes this situation more complicated. That's not enough time to... It's the only time you have. Dante's voice hardened slightly. I've been more patient with you than I would normally be, Maya. More generous with information and explanation. But my patience has limits. You decide now. You work for me, accept my protection and my conditions, or... He didn't finish the sentence. Or you kill me. Maya's voice shook with anger and fear. Just like that? I'm a person. I have a family. You can't just... I can. Dante interrupted quietly. I don't want to, which is why I'm offering you an alternative. But yes, Maya, I can. Because the alternative, letting you walk out of here knowing what you know, that puts dozens of people I'm responsible for at risk. How is their safety worth less than yours? It was a horrible logic, but Maya couldn't find the flaw in it. He was right. From his perspective, she was a threat. An uncontained variable in an equation that required precision. She thought of her mother, who'd already buried a husband and would have to bury a daughter. She thought of Miguel, who'd lose his sister on top of losing his father. She thought of the algebra homework still waiting on the kitchen table, the medical bills still arriving in the mail, the small dreams she'd harbored of someday, maybe, going back to school, becoming something more than a waitress working double shifts. She thought of Marco in the chair, who'd tried to protect his son and lost everything. If I agree, Maya said slowly, what exactly would I have to do? Dante's expression relaxed fractionally. He could sense her capitulation. Translation work initially. Documents, recordings, occasional video calls with associates in Italy. You'd be on call, available when needed. Completely confidential. You tell no one what you do, what you see, what you hear. Not your mother, not your brother, not your priest. I don't have a priest. Then that makes it easier. A hint of dry humor touched his voice. In exchange, your father's medical debt disappears completely, paid in full by tomorrow afternoon. Your family's rent is covered. I own the building they live in, did you know that? Your mother will never worry about eviction. Miguel gets a trust fund for college. And you, he paused, you get safety, protection. No one touches you or your family. Ever. It was everything she needed, everything she'd been struggling for, handed to her wrapped in blood and moral compromise. And if I want out later, we can discuss that if the time comes. But understand, you'll know things. You'll always know things. Some doors, once you walk through them, you can't walk back out. Maya closed her eyes. She could hear her grandmother's voice in her memory, speaking in musical Sicilian. Life gives you hard choices to sorrow. The only sin is refusing to choose. She opened her eyes and looked directly at Dante. I want my mother and brother protected. Always. Whatever happens to me, they stay safe. Done. And I want your word that they'll never know what I do. They think I'm getting a better job, a promotion, whatever story we need to tell, but they never know the truth. Agreed. And Marco. She glanced at the man in the chair. His son. If there's any way to protect the boy without compromising your security, you do it. Dante's eyes narrowed slightly, reassessing her again. You're negotiating for a traitor? I'm negotiating for a 19-year-old kid who made a mistake. Marco's situation, that's between you and him. But Tommy didn't betray anyone. For a long moment, Dante said nothing. Then, slowly, he nodded. I'll see what can be done. No promises, but I'll look into it. It wasn't enough, but it was something. Maya took a deep breath. Okay, she said. I'll do it. Dante extended his hand. Maya stared at it for a second. This hand that had probably ordered violence, that had built an empire on illegal foundations, that was now offering her salvation at a terrible price. She shook it. His grip was firm, warm, and as their hands clasped, Maya felt the trajectory of her life shift irrevocably. She was no longer just a waitress struggling to survive. She was something else now, something she didn't have a name for yet. You start tomorrow, Dante said, releasing her hand. Luca will pick you up at noon. Bring nothing with you. We'll provide everything you need. What do I tell my mother? Tell her you got a new job. Better pay, office work, nothing specific. She'll be happy for you. He gestured toward the stairs. Go home, Maya. Get some sleep. And remember, from this moment forward, silence isn't just golden. It's survival. Maya nodded numbly and moved toward the stairs. As she climbed, she heard Dante speak to Luca in Italian, words she couldn't quite catch. At the top, she paused and looked back down. Dante stood at the bottom of the stairs, looking up at her. In the dim basement light, his face was half in shadow. Maya, he called up, you made the right choice. I'll make sure you don't regret it. But as Maya pushed through the basement door and emerged into the quiet restaurant, as she grabbed her coat and walked out into the rain-soaked streets of Little Italy, she couldn't shake the feeling that regret was inevitable. She just didn't know what form it would take yet. Maya didn't sleep that night. She lay in her narrow bed in the apartment she shared with her mother and Miguel, staring at the water-stained ceiling while her mind replayed every moment in Café Lombardi. The rain had finally stopped around 3 a.m., leaving the streets outside slick and gleaming under the streetlights. Through the thin walls, she could hear her mother's soft snoring, the occasional creak of Miguel shifting in his sleep. Normal sounds, safe sounds, sounds from a life that felt increasingly distant with each passing hour. When her alarm buzzed at 7, Maya was already dressed. She'd showered in near darkness, careful not to wake anyone, and now sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee she couldn't bring herself to drink. Her hands still trembled slightly, residual adrenaline from the night before, or maybe just fear of what came next. Mija, her mother emerged from the bedroom, wrapping her worn bathrobe around herself. Carmen Torres was 52 but looked older, her face lined from years of double shifts as a home health aide and the stress of her husband's illness. You're up early. I was so worried last night when you didn't come home until after 2. I'm sorry, Mama. There was an issue at the restaurant and Tony needed me to stay late to handle it. The lie came easier than Maya expected. Maybe she was already adapting. Is everything okay? Actually, Maya set down her untouched coffee. Something good happened. I got a job offer. A better position with an office downtown. The pay is significantly better. Carmen's tired face lit up with genuine joy. Oh, Maya, that's wonderful. Doing what? Translation services, business documents, communications. My Sicilian Nonna's lessons are finally paying off. Another lie, but wrapped around a core of truth, the easiest kind to tell. When do you start? Today. Someone's picking me up at noon. Maya stood, dumping the cold coffee in the sink. I need to give Tony my notice at the cafe, but this is the opportunity we've been waiting for, Mama. Real money, benefits. I can finally start making a dent in Papa's medical bills. Carmen crossed herself, her eyes filling with tears. Your father would be so proud of you, Corazon. Working so hard, taking care of us. The guilt twisted like a knife in Maya's chest, but she forced a smile and hugged her mother. Over Carmen's shoulder, she saw Miguel shuffling out of the bedroom, his hair sticking up in every direction, already in his basketball shorts and an oversized t-shirt. You got a new job? He asked, having caught the end of the conversation. Yeah. Does that mean you'll be home more? Maybe help me with my algebra without falling asleep halfway through? He grinned, but there was hope in his eyes. I'll do my best, Maya promised, though she had no idea what her new schedule would look like. What demands Dante Russo would make on her time. The morning crawled by. Maya called Tony at 10, apologizing for the short notice but explaining she had to take another opportunity. Tony was understanding, suspiciously so. He probably knew exactly why she was really leaving, but he asked no questions. You're a good girl, Maya, he said before hanging up. Be careful. At 11:30, Maya stood in front of her closet, trying to decide what one wore to their first day working for the Mafia. She settled on dark jeans, a simple black sweater, and the only pair of nice boots she owned. Professional but not overdressed. Unremarkable. Her phone buzzed at exactly noon. Black Mercedes. Outside. Unknown number. Maya grabbed her purse. She'd packed nothing else as instructed and headed downstairs. Her mother had already left for work, and Miguel was at school. She was alone as she stepped out onto the street and saw the sleek black car idling at the curb. The rear window rolled down, revealing Luca's scarred face. Get in. Maya slid into the back seat, the leather interior pristine and smelling of expensive cologne. Luca didn't speak as the driver pulled away from the curb, navigating through the late morning traffic of lower Manhattan. Maya watched her neighborhood disappear in the side mirror, the bodega where she bought groceries, the laundromat where she washed clothes every Sunday, the basketball court where Miguel spent his afternoons. They drove for 20 minutes, eventually pulling up to a modern glass building in Tribeca. Nothing about it screamed organized crime headquarters. It looked like any other upscale office building in the area, with a minimalist lobby and a doorman in a crisp uniform. 15th floor, Luca said as they entered the elevator. You'll have a workspace there. Dante's office is on 16. The 15th floor was surprisingly corporate. An open plan with several desks, filing cabinets, a conference room visible through glass walls. 3 people worked at computers, barely glancing up as Luca led Maya to a private office in the corner. It was small but well appointed. A desk with a computer, a comfortable chair, a window overlooking the Hudson River. Someone will bring you documents within the hour, Luca explained. You translate them. You save them to this encrypted folder. He indicated an icon on the computer desktop, and nowhere else. You don't make copies. You don't take photos. You don't discuss the content with anyone except Dante. Understand? Yes. There's a break room down the hall. Bathroom is next to it. You don't wander, you don't ask questions, you do your work and you go home. He handed her a new phone, still in its packaging. This is your work phone. Keep it on you always. When Dante calls, you answer. When he texts, you respond. Clear? Clear. Luca studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable. For what it's worth, you handled yourself better than most people would have last night. But don't let that make you confident. This world, he gestured vaguely at the office around them. It looks clean and professional, but it's still dangerous. People who forget that don't last long. Then he left, closing the door behind him. Maya sat at the desk, her hands resting on the smooth wooden surface, and tried to process her new reality. Through the window, she could see boats moving on the Hudson. Tourists, probably. People living normal lives. She felt impossibly distant from them. The documents arrived 40 minutes later, delivered by a young woman with dark lipstick, and an expression that suggested she'd seen things that would give most people nightmares. She set a manila folder on Maya's desk without a word, and left. Inside were 3 letters handwritten in elegant Sicilian script. Maya began translating, her grandmother's voice guiding her through the archaic phrases and regional idioms. The letters were from someone named Don Salvatore in Palermo, discussing shipments and percentages, territories and disputes. Nothing explicit enough to be obviously criminal, but the subtext was clear to anyone who understood the language. She saved the translations to the encrypted folder as instructed and sat back, feeling grimy despite not having done anything physically dirty. This was her life now, facilitating communications for people who operated outside the law. The next 2 weeks fell into a strange rhythm. Maya arrived at the office at noon most days, translated documents or occasionally listened to audio recordings, saved everything to the encrypted folders, and went home by 6 or 7. The work itself wasn't difficult. Her grandmother had taught her well, but the content made her stomach turn. She was translating discussions of territory, of problems being handled, of money moving through channels that existed in shadows. She saw Dante only twice in those first 2 weeks. The first time was 3 days in, when he appeared in her office doorway without warning. "How are you settling in?" he asked, leaning against the doorframe with that same casual authority he seemed to wear like a second skin. "Fine." Maya kept her voice neutral. "The translations are good, very accurate. Don Salvatore was impressed. He said your Sicilian is better than his grandson's." Dante stepped into the office, closing the door behind him. "Your mother received a check yesterday. Settlement from the hospital, the paperwork said, covering all of your father's outstanding medical debt, plus a little extra for the inconvenience." Maya had seen the check. $19,000. Her mother had cried for an hour, unable to believe their prayers had been answered. The guilt had eaten at Maya all evening. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I keep my promises." Dante moved to the window, looking out at the river. "And your brother, Miguel, he's trying out for the basketball team next week?" The casual knowledge of her family's life should have stopped surprising her, but it still sent a chill down her spine. "Yes, he'll make it. He's good." Dante turned back to face her. "You're adapting well, Maya. Better than I expected. Most people struggle more with the moral adjustment." "You mean most people feel guilty about helping criminals?" Dante's lips quirked in something almost like a smile. "You have opinions. I respect that. But consider this. What we do, it's not so different from what legitimate businesses do. We provide services people want. We protect our territories. We maintain order in our communities. The only difference is, we don't pretend the law is anything other than a tool for those with power to maintain it. That's a convenient philosophy for someone who profits from breaking that law. And yet you're here, his gray eyes fixed on hers, making your own calculations about what's acceptable in exchange for survival. Don't mistake me for a villain in your story, Maya. I'm just someone who understands how the world really works. He left after that, and Maya sat alone in her office, hating that part of her understood his logic, hating that the check paying off her father's debts had felt like a miracle, hating that she was already becoming complicit. The second time she saw Dante was more significant. It was late on a Friday, almost 8 p.m. Maya had been working on a particularly complex translation, a recorded conversation between Dante and someone in Naples, full of coded language and regional slang that took her hours to parse accurately. She was exhausted, her eyes burning from staring at the computer screen, when Dante appeared in her doorway again. "Still here?" he asked, finishing the Naples recording. "It's complicated. He keeps switching between Napolitano and Standard Italian, and some of the idioms are—" She stopped, realizing she was rambling from fatigue. "Take a break. Come upstairs." It wasn't a request. Maya saved her work and followed Dante to the elevator, which required a key card to access the 16th floor. When the doors opened, she found herself in what looked like a luxury apartment converted into an office suite. Hardwood floors, expensive art on the walls, floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city lights. Dante's office was at the far end, spacious and minimalist. A massive desk, leather chairs, a bar cart with bottles that probably cost more than Maya made in a month. He gestured for her to sit while he poured 2 glasses of something amber. "I don't drink," Maya said. "It's just cognac. 1 glass won't hurt you." He handed it to her anyway. "You've been working 12-hour days this week. Why?" "The work needs to be done well. Some of these documents are time-sensitive. The work needs to be done accurately, which you're doing. But burning yourself out doesn't help anyone." Dante sat across from her, swirling the cognac in his glass. "You're trying to prove something. To me? Or to yourself?" Maya took a small sip of the cognac, feeling it burn down her throat. "Maybe both. You don't need to prove anything to me. I already know you're competent, that's why you're here." He paused. "But I'm curious about the guilt you're carrying. Most people in your position either rationalize quickly or fall apart. You're doing neither. You're just enduring. What else am I supposed to do? You could leave. Walk away. I told you before. Some doors you can't walk back through. But I'd make an exception for you. Your family stays protected. The debt stays paid. You go back to your normal life." Maya looked at him sharply, searching for the trap. "Why would you offer that?" "Because I don't want people working for me who are here under duress. It makes them unreliable. If you're going to do this, I need to know you're choosing it." "Choosing it?" Maya repeated bitterly. "You threatened to kill me if I didn't cooperate. That was 2 weeks ago. You've proven your discretion. You've been valuable. The situation has evolved." Dante leaned forward slightly. "So I'm giving you a choice now. Real one. Stay and become part of this organization, with all the benefits and risks that entails. Or leave, with my gratitude for your service, and my assurance of your family's continued safety." Maya's mind raced. This was her chance to escape, to return to her simple, if difficult, life. She could go back to being just a waitress, struggling but clean, unburdened by the knowledge of what she'd been translating, what she'd been facilitating. But even as she thought it, she knew it wasn't that simple. "The night Marco was in the basement," Maya said slowly, "you told me you hadn't decided what to do with him yet. What happened?" Dante's expression became carefully neutral. "He's alive, relocated. His cooperation with the FBI ended. His handler has been informed he's no longer a reliable source, and his son's legal problems were resolved through alternative channels. Marco and his family are living in Arizona now under different names with enough money to start over. They'll never come back to New York. You let him live. I told you, I'm not my father. Sometimes mercy is strategically sound." Dante took a sip of his cognac. His betrayal was motivated by love for his son, not greed or ambition. "That's understandable, even if it's not forgivable. And you asked me to protect the boy, remember? I keep my promises." Maya absorbed this, trying to reconcile it with her image of who Dante was. "You're more complicated than I thought. Most people are." He smiled slightly. "So, your decision. Stay or go." Maya looked out the window at Manhattan glittering in the darkness. Somewhere out there, her mother was probably finishing her shift at the hospital, tired but no longer worried about eviction or crushing debt. Miguel was maybe at a friend's house, his basketball shoes already broken in from practice, college suddenly feeling possible instead of impossibly distant. They were safe. For the first time in years, they were truly safe. And she had done that. Not through endless double shifts and desperate frugality, but by stepping into this darker world and making herself useful. If I stay, Maya said carefully, what does that look like long term? I keep translating indefinitely. For now, yes, but people in this organization who prove themselves valuable tend to take on more responsibility. More trust means more knowledge, which means more risk but also more protection. Dante set down his glass. I'll be honest with you, Maya. The work you're doing is important. The old families in Sicily, they don't trust phones, they don't trust email. They write letters in dialects that most young people don't even speak anymore. You're a bridge between generations, between the old ways and new realities. That makes you genuinely valuable, not just useful. And if I want out later, if I decide I can't do this anymore, we'll negotiate when that time comes. But understand, you'll know things. You'll always know things. Complete separation wouldn't be possible. He met her eyes steadily. I won't lie to you about that. This isn't a job you quit and walk away from cleanly. Maya knew he was right. She'd already crossed too many lines, learned too many secrets. The Maya who'd been a simple waitress 3 weeks ago no longer existed. That person had died in the basement of Cafe Lombardi, reading a note in Sicilian that exposed a traitor. I'll stay, she said. Dante nodded slowly, as if he'd expected this answer but was pleased nonetheless. Then we need to establish clearer parameters. Your compensation increases to $5,000 a month paid in cash. You keep your apartment for appearances, but I'm moving your mother and Miguel to a better building in a safer neighborhood. Still in your name, still your choice, but better security. Miguel's college fund gets established officially, and you get a car and driver for when you need to move around the city safely. That's too much. It's appropriate for your value to the organization, Dante interrupted. Don't think of it as charity. Think of it as investment. I'm investing in keeping you safe, comfortable, and focused on your work. He pulled out his phone and typed something quickly. You'll also need to learn more about how we operate. Understanding context will help you translate more accurately. Luca will brief you on organizational structure, key players, how information flows. Consider it orientation. Maya felt the world shifting again, her role expanding from simple translator to something more integrated, more complicit. Okay. And Maya, Dante's voice took on a harder edge. From this point forward, you're under my protection explicitly. That means anyone who threatens you, threatens me. But it also means I expect absolute loyalty, absolute discretion. The kind of betrayal Marco attempted would not be met with mercy in your case, are we clear? Yes? Good. He stood, signaling the conversation was over. Go home. Rest this weekend. Monday we start the real work. As Maya rode the elevator down, then walked out into the cool November night where a car was waiting to drive her home, she felt the weight of her decision settling over her like a cloak. She'd chosen this. Not under immediate threat of death anymore, but chosen it nonetheless. She was part of Dante Russo's world now, part of the family, in all its dangerous complexity. And somewhere deep inside, beneath the guilt and fear, Maya felt something else stirring. A sense of purpose she hadn't felt since her father died. A feeling of being valued for her specific skills, her intelligence, her unique knowledge. It terrified her, but it also made her feel alive in a way she hadn't in years. As the car navigated through the late-night traffic toward her neighborhood, Maya looked at her reflection in the window, just a shadow against the city lights. She barely recognized herself anymore, and she wondered if that was a loss or a liberation. Maybe, she thought, it was both. 3 weeks into December, Maya received her first late-night summons. The text came at 11:47 p.m., jolting her awake. Tribeca office, now, urgent. She dressed quickly in the darkness of her new bedroom. The apartment Dante had arranged was in a quiet building in the West Village, spacious and secure, worlds away from the cramped place she'd shared with her family. Her mother and Miguel now lived 2 floors above her, Carmen still marveling at their good fortune, Miguel already making friends with kids in the building. The driver was waiting outside, as always. Maya had learned not to ask questions during these late calls. She'd learned many things in the past month: how to recognize surveillance, which topics required immediate escalation to Dante, how to read between the lines of seemingly innocent correspondence. Luca had been thorough in her education. The office building was nearly empty at midnight, just a security guard who nodded at her with recognition. On the 15th floor, lights blazed in the conference room. Through the glass walls, Maya could see Dante, Luca, and 2 other men she'd come to know. Vincent, who handled operations in Brooklyn, and Carlo, Dante's financial advisor. And there was someone else. A younger man, maybe 30, with nervous energy radiating from every movement. He sat apart from the others, his leg bouncing anxiously. Dante looked up as Maya entered. His expression was grim. "Thank you for coming quickly," he said. "We have a situation that requires your particular expertise." He gestured to the nervous man. "This is Frank Castellano. He works for us, managing distribution in Queens. Frank received a message today. Delivered by hand, no return address. It's in Sicilian. We need to know exactly what it says." Frank pushed a cream-colored envelope across the conference table toward Maya. Inside was a single sheet of paper, the handwriting familiar, elegant, old-fashioned, the same style as the note about Marco. Maya's hands weren't shaking anymore when she handled these documents. That was progress, she supposed, or corruption. She read silently first, her stomach sinking as she processed the words. Then she looked up at Dante. "It's a warning," she said quietly, "from someone who signs himself as a friend to the old ways. He's telling Frank that there's an informant in this room, someone who's been passing information not to the FBI but to a rival family, the Calabrians in New Jersey." The temperature in the room dropped. Vincent and Carlo exchanged sharp glances. Luca's hand moved almost imperceptibly toward his waist, where Maya knew he kept a gun. "Keep reading," Dante said, his voice dangerously calm. "The informant has been providing details about shipment routes, supplier connections, and financial arrangements. The message says the traitor is someone close to you, someone you trust, implicitly." Maya paused, her throat dry. "It says to watch who has access to the encrypted files, to notice who asks questions beyond their responsibility." "Does it name anyone?" Dante asked. Maya looked back at the letter, reading the final paragraph again carefully. "No. But it says the betrayal comes from your left hand, the one you rely on when your right is occupied." Silence fell over the conference room like a shroud. Dante sat perfectly still, his gray eyes moving from face to face around the table. Maya watched him calculate, analyze, weigh possibilities. She'd learned to recognize this mode. Dante at his most dangerous, when emotion disappeared entirely, and only cold, strategic thinking remained. "Frank," Dante said finally, "where exactly did you receive this letter?" "It was slipped under my apartment door," Frank answered, his voice shaking slightly. "I found it this morning. I didn't know what to do. I can't read Sicilian, so I brought it straight to Luca." "Did anyone see you bring it here?" "No, I was careful." Dante nodded slowly. "Vincent, Carlo, you're dismissed. Say nothing about this meeting to anyone. Understood?" Both men left quickly, clearly relieved to be excused. That left Dante, Luca, Frank, and Maya in the conference room. "Frank, wait outside," Dante instructed. "Luca will call you back in shortly." When Frank had gone, closing the conference room door behind him, Dante turned to Luca. "Your assessment?" he asked. Luca's scarred face was unreadable. "The letter is authentic. Same style as the one about Marco, same formal Sicilian phrasing. Whoever sent it knows our operations intimately, and the reference to 'your left hand' could mean you," Dante finished quietly. "My second in command, the person I trust most." Maya felt the tension ratchet impossibly higher. She looked at Luca, trying to read his reaction. His expression showed nothing but professional attention, but something in his eyes. Hurt, maybe, or anger at the implication. "It could also mean Carlo," Luca said evenly. "He handles the financial side. Literally your left hand in business matters while I handle enforcement. Or Vincent, or any number of people. But you have the most access," Dante observed. "You know everything, Luca. Every operation, every connection, every weakness. I've been with you for 15 years, Luca replied, his voice hardening slightly. "Since we were kids working collection for your father. I've bled for this family. I've killed for this family. And you're going to suspect me based on an anonymous letter?" "I'm not suspecting you," Dante said. "I'm considering all possibilities. That's what keeps us alive." Maya watched this exchange with growing dread. She understood what was happening. Dante was probing, testing, seeing how Luca would react to accusation. It was a technique she'd seen him use before, creating pressure to reveal truth. "Maya," Dante said, turning to her, "in the documents you've been translating, the financial records, the correspondence with suppliers, have you noticed anything unusual? Any information that shouldn't have been shared or requests that seemed odd?" Maya thought carefully. Over the past weeks, she'd translated hundreds of pages, listened to dozens of recordings. Most of it had blurred together into a stream of coded business discussions and careful negotiations. But there was something. 3 weeks ago, she said slowly, there was a recording you asked me to translate. A conversation with suppliers in Naples about a shipment coming through Port Elizabeth. You were very specific about keeping that information limited. You said explicitly that only you, Luca, and Carlo should know the details. I remember, Dante said. What about it? 2 days later, I was translating a letter from Don Salvatore in Palermo. He mentioned hearing about complications at Port Elizabeth, asking if you'd sorted out the problems with the Calabrians interfering. Maya met Dante's eyes. But you hadn't told Don Salvatore about that shipment. I remember thinking it was strange that he knew about it. Dante's expression didn't change, but Maya saw Luca shift slightly in his peripheral vision. Who had access to that recording? Dante asked. It was saved to the encrypted folder, Maya said. The main one that Luca, Carlo, and I can access. And you, of course. And who knew Don Salvatore shouldn't have that information? Just those of us in this room right now, Luca said quietly. The information flow was carefully controlled. If Salvatore knew about Port Elizabeth, someone told him. Someone with access. Dante stood and walked to the conference room windows, looking out at the dark city. Maya could practically see him assembling pieces of a puzzle, building a picture of betrayal from fragments of information. There have been other leaks, he said finally. Small ones. Information appearing in unexpected places. Complications that shouldn't have happened. I attributed it to normal intelligence gathering. Our rivals have sources, we have sources, information flows. But if someone inside is deliberately feeding intelligence to the Calabrians, it would explain the past 6 months, Luca finished. The problems in Queens, the warehouse raid that seemed too well-timed, the supplier who suddenly backed out of our arrangement. Maya watched Dante's reflection in the window, saw the moment his decision crystallized. We're going to set a trap, he announced, turning back to face them. False information. Carefully contained. We'll tell different versions to different people and see which version makes it to our enemies. His eyes fixed on Luca. Starting with you. Dante. Luca's voice carried an edge of hurt that surprised Maya. This isn't personal, Dante interrupted. It's operational. Everyone with access to sensitive information gets tested, including you, including Maya, including me if that were possible. He moved back to the table, his movements controlled and precise. Here's how it works. Tomorrow, I'm telling you about a major shipment coming through Baltimore. High value, time sensitive. You'll know the date, the route, the contents. All false, but you won't know that. And if the Calabrians show up in Baltimore expecting a shipment that doesn't exist, Luca asked, then I know where the leak is, Dante said simply. He turned to Maya. You'll receive similar false information through a recorded conversation you'll translate. Different details, different port, different date. If that version leaks, we know the breach is through the translation chain. What about Carlo and the others? Maya asked. They each get their own version, different operational details that only they would know. Dante's expression was grim. Within a week, we'll see who our enemies act on. The traitor will expose themselves. It was elegant and brutal. Maya understood why Dante had survived and thrived in this world. He thought 3 moves ahead, turning suspicion into certainty through careful manipulation. And when you find the traitor? Luca asked quietly. Then we handle it, Dante replied. The way we always handle betrayal. Maya thought of Marco, exiled to Arizona with his family. That had been mercy, born from understanding and her own intervention. But this was different. This wasn't a father protecting his son under FBI pressure. This was calculated betrayal for profit or power, the kind that got people killed. She wasn't sure Dante would be merciful this time. Frank can go home, Dante decided. The letter was a warning from someone, possibly genuine, possibly manipulation. Either way, we're acting on it. He looked at Luca. You disagree with this approach? No, Luca said after a moment. You're right. Trust is earned continuously, not granted permanently. I'll take whatever test you need me to. But his jaw was tight, his shoulders tense. The hurt of being suspected was evident, even if he understood the necessity. Maya felt a pang of sympathy for him. 15 years of loyalty, now questioned because of an anonymous letter and a few suspicious coincidences. But she also understood Dante's position. In this world, misplaced trust was fatal. Go home, both of you, Dante said. We start the operation tomorrow. And remember, say nothing, not to anyone. The trap only works if the traitor believes the information is real. In the elevator down, Luca stood rigid and silent. Maya wanted to say something comforting but couldn't find words that wouldn't sound hollow or inappropriate. He's wrong, you know, Luca said suddenly as they reached the lobby. I would never betray him. Not for money, not for power, not for anything. I believe you, Maya said quietly. Luca looked at her, his scarred face softening slightly. You're good at this. Reading people, understanding situations. Dante chose well when he recruited you. I didn't have much choice. None of us do, really. We all end up here through circumstances, through necessity. Luca pushed open the lobby door, letting in the cold December air. But once you're in, the choice becomes different. You choose loyalty or betrayal, honor or treachery. That's the only real choice we have. Maya thought about that as her driver took her home through the quiet pre-dawn streets. She thought about Marco's impossible choice, about the trap being set, about the traitor, whoever they were, who'd made their choice already. And she wondered, not for the first time, what choice she'd make when the moment came that truly tested her loyalty. She hoped she wouldn't have to find out, but deep down she knew that hope was naive. In Dante's world, everyone got tested eventually. It was only a matter of time. The trap took 4 days to spring. Maya spent those days translating her assigned false information, a fabricated conversation about a pharmaceutical shipment arriving at the port of Newark on December 23rd. The details were specific, convincing, expensive enough to be worth intercepting. She saved it to the encrypted folder as always, then waited. Dante had warned her the hardest part would be acting normal, pretending she didn't know she was bait in a larger operation. She went about her work, translated genuine documents alongside the false ones, had coffee in the break room with the woman who brought her assignments. Normal routines masking extraordinary tension. On the 4th night, Dante summoned her again. This time, the conference room held only 3 people. Dante, Luca, and a laptop displaying surveillance footage. Dante's expression was carved from stone. It was Carlo, he said without preamble as Maya entered. The financial advisor. He contacted the Calabrians about the Baltimore shipment. My false information to Luca. Not the Newark port you translated. Not the Queens route Vincent was told about. Baltimore. Luca's information. Maya's eyes went to Luca, who stood with his arms crossed, vindicated but not triumphant. Just tired. How do you know? She asked. Dante turned the laptop toward her. The surveillance footage showed Carlo in a parking garage, meeting with a man Maya didn't recognize. No audio, but the body language told the story. An envelope changing hands, urgent conversation. Carlo looking nervous. We've been watching everyone with access, Dante explained. The Calabrians made contact with Carlo 3 hours ago. They wanted confirmation of the Baltimore details before committing resources to the interception. He closed the laptop with careful precision. 15 years. He's been with us 15 years and he sold us out for what? A percentage. A promise of protection when they make their move against us. What did he tell them? Maya asked. Everything Luca knew about Baltimore. Dates, routes, product value, security measures. Dante's voice was flat, emotionless. If it had been real, we'd have lost $500,000 in product and probably 3 men. The Calabrians don't leave witnesses. The weight of that settled over the room. Maya thought about the men she'd seen in the office. Young guys mostly with families working for Dante because it paid better than legitimate options in a city that had forgotten people like them. Where is he now? Luca asked. Being collected. He'll be here within the hour. Dante looked at Maya. I'm telling you this because you're part of this organization now. You deserve to know when there's a threat, when someone betrays the family. And because, he paused, I want your perspective on what happens next. Maya blinked. My perspective? You asked me to show mercy to Marco. You negotiated for his son's protection. I listened, and Marco is alive in Arizona. His son is fine. Dante leaned against the conference table. Carlo's situation is different. He wasn't coerced by threats to his family. He chose profit over loyalty. But before I make a final decision, I want to hear what you think. It felt like a test, though Maya couldn't determine what kind. She looked at Luca, who watched her with interest, then back to Dante. What are my options? She asked carefully. You're not actually asking if you should let him go. No, he can't walk away from this. But there are degrees of consequences. Dante's gray eyes held hers. I could handle this the traditional way, permanent solution, or I could do what we did with Marco, Exile, relocation, survival with conditions. What would you recommend? Maya's mind raced. This was the moment Luca had predicted, her loyalty being tested through an impossible choice. Advocate for mercy and risk seeming soft. Naive. Advocate for brutality and lose whatever remained of her soul. I need to ask questions first, she said finally. Dante nodded. Go ahead. Does Carlo have family? Kids? A wife, 2 daughters, 8 and 11. Maya felt sick. And if the traditional solution happens, what happens to them? They're provided for, Luca answered. We're not animals. The wife receives a settlement, enough to relocate and start over. The daughters never know the details. Carlo disappears, presumed to have abandoned them or met with an accident. But they lose their father, Maya said. Forever. For a choice he made. Yes, Dante agreed. Just like your brother almost lost his sister for a choice Marco made. Just like my men could have died in Baltimore for a choice Carlo made. Actions have consequences. The question is how far those consequences extend. Maya walked to the window, looking out at the December night. Snow had started to fall, light flakes drifting past the glass. Somewhere in the city, Carlo's daughters were probably asleep, dreaming ordinary dreams, unaware their father's betrayal was about to reshape their lives. Marco was coerced, she said slowly, thinking it through aloud. The FBI threatened his son and he broke under that pressure. It was understandable even if it wasn't forgivable. But Carlo, she turned back to face Dante. Carlo chose this freely. For money. That's different. It is, Dante confirmed. But killing him doesn't undo the betrayal. It doesn't recover the information he's already shared. It just creates more pain. For his family. For everyone connected to him. Maya took a breath. And it makes you exactly what people think you are. A killer without conscience. Luca's eyebrows rose slightly. Dante's expression didn't change. What would you do? Dante asked quietly. I'd make him fix it, Maya said. The Calabrians think they have good intelligence about Baltimore. Use that. Feed them more false information through Carlo now that you know he's the leak. Let them commit resources based on bad intelligence, then. She stopped, realizing what she was suggesting. Then you have an advantage. You know what they're planning because Carlo is still feeding them exactly what you want them to know. Dante and Luca exchanged a glance. Turn him into a double agent, Luca said. Controlled information flow. It's risky, Dante observed. Carlo already betrayed us once. What makes you think he won't betray us again? Because you'll have leverage, Maya replied, her strategic thinking surprising even herself. His family, not threats, actual protection. You tell Carlo his wife and daughters are under your direct protection now. If he cooperates, feeds the Calabrians exactly what you tell him to feed them, his family stays safe and provided for. If he deviates even slightly, if he tries to run, or warn the Calabrians, she met Dante's eyes. Then the traditional solution. But his family still gets the settlement. Because you're better than he is. Silence filled the conference room. Maya could hear her own heartbeat. Wondered if she'd just crossed a line she couldn't uncross. She'd just proposed using a man's family as leverage. Manipulating him through love and fear. When had she become someone who thought in these terms? It's elegant, Luca said finally. And it turns our biggest vulnerability into an asset. The Calabrians trust Carlo's information now. We can use that trust against them. Dante walked to the window where Maya had been standing, his reflection ghostly in the glass against the falling snow. You've learned quickly, he said to her reflection. Maybe too quickly. You asked for my perspective. I did, and it's a good strategy. Better than simple revenge. He turned to face her directly. But it also means you're complicit in a different way now. You're not just translating documents. You're actively participating in operational planning. That's a line, Maya. Once you cross it, there's no going back to being the innocent waitress who stumbled into this world. Maya understood what he was offering. A last chance to retreat, to maintain some boundary between translation work and actual involvement in the organization's strategies. If she stepped back now, said she'd only provide the linguistic services and nothing more, Dante might accept that. But she knew it was an illusion. She'd already crossed too many lines. And more importantly, she didn't want to step back. Somewhere in the past month, something had shifted in her. The fear was still there, the moral uncertainty, the guilt about what she was becoming. But beneath that was a growing sense of competence, of purpose, of being genuinely valued for her intelligence rather than just her labor. Dante saw her as an asset, yes, but also as someone whose opinion mattered, someone worth consulting. In her entire life, Maya had never felt that kind of professional respect. "I'm already past that line," she said quietly. "We both know it. The question is whether I'm useful enough to keep around." Dante's lips curved into something almost like a real smile. "You're useful. The question is whether you can live with what being useful requires." Before Maya could respond, Dante's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then nodded to Luca. "Carlo's here. Bring him up." Luca left, and Maya found herself alone with Dante for the first time in weeks. The intimacy of the moment felt strange. They'd maintained professional distance despite the unusual nature of their relationship, but now something had shifted. "You could still leave," Dante said suddenly. "After tonight. I meant what I said before. Your family stays protected. The debt stays paid. You've proven your value, but you don't have to stay if this isn't what you want." "Why are you offering again?" Maya asked. "You need translators. You said yourself I'm good at this." "Because I don't want you here out of obligation or fear. I want—" He stopped, seeming to choose his words carefully. "I want people around me who choose this, who understand what we're building and want to be part of it. Coercion creates resentment. Resentment creates betrayal. Like Carlo. Exactly like Carlo." Dante moved closer, his gray eyes searching her face. "So tell me honestly, Maya, if you could walk away right now completely safe, completely free, would you?" Maya thought about her apartment, comfortable and secure, about Miguel's college fund, her mother's relief at no longer living paycheck to paycheck, about the work itself, challenging, important in its way, utilizing skills her grandmother had given her. But more than that, she thought about feeling capable, intelligent, valued, about Dante asking her opinion and actually listening, about solving puzzles that mattered, even if they were puzzles built from crime and violence. "No," she admitted, "I wouldn't leave." "Why not?" "Because I'm good at this. Because it matters. Because—" she struggled to articulate it. "Because for the first time since my father died, I don't feel like I'm just surviving. I feel like I'm building something." Dante nodded slowly, and Maya saw something in his expression. Satisfaction, perhaps, or recognition. "Then you're one of us now. Truly. Not because I'm forcing you, but because you choose it." The elevator chimed. Luca returned with Carlo between two larger men Maya recognized as enforcers. Carlo's face was pale, his eyes wide with fear, but he wasn't injured. Not yet. "Sit," Dante commanded, gesturing to a chair at the conference table. Carlo sat, his hands trembling. "Dante, please, I can explain. I don't need explanations. I have surveillance footage. I have testimony from your Calabrian contacts who we've been monitoring." Dante's voice was ice. "What I need is your cooperation." Over the next hour, Maya watched Dante execute the strategy she'd proposed with brutal efficiency. He laid out Carlo's betrayal in precise detail, showed him the evidence, made clear that denial was pointless. Then he presented the choice: death or controlled cooperation. "You feed them exactly what I tell you to feed them," Dante explained. "You continue being their source, but now you're my source too. Every meeting, every conversation you report to Luca. Your family moves into a building I control, under direct protection. You step out of line even once." He didn't finish the sentence. Carlo, faced with the choice between certain death and possible survival, broke down. Tears, promises, desperate gratitude. It was pathetic and human and sad. Maya watched without flinching. She'd proposed this. She'd set this particular trap. The guilt she'd expected didn't come, just a calm certainty that this was the right strategic choice. When Carlo was led away to be briefed on his new role, Dante turned to Maya. "You did well tonight," he said. "Better than I expected." "I'm not sure that's a compliment." "It is. You're thinking like someone who belongs in this organization, someone I can rely on." He extended his hand. "Welcome to the family, Maya. The real family. Not the coerced associate, but the trusted inner circle." Maya shook his hand, feeling the shift crystallize. She'd made her choice fully and finally. Not under threat, not under duress, but with clear eyes and understanding of what it meant. She was part of Dante Russo's world now. Not a victim, not a prisoner, a willing participant. As she rode the elevator down later, alone in the mirrored box, Maya looked at her reflection. The woman looking back was different from the exhausted waitress who'd read a note in Sicilian 6 weeks ago. Harder, more confident, more compromised, but also more alive. Her phone buzzed. A text from her mother. Miguel made the basketball team. He's so happy. Thank you for everything you've done for us, mija. You've saved our family. Maya smiled at the message, feeling the familiar warmth of her mother's love. Miguel's joy. They were safe, thriving, because of choices she'd made, lines she'd crossed. She typed back, "That's wonderful, Mama. Tell him I'm proud of him. I'll be home soon." The elevator doors opened to the lobby. Outside, snow fell softly on the Manhattan streets, covering everything in pristine white, beautiful and temporary. By morning, the city's dirt would show through again. Maya stepped out into the December night, her phone in one hand, her new life waiting in the other. She'd made her choice. She'd chosen the darkness, but she'd also chosen power, security, and purpose. And for better or worse, she'd learned to live with the cost. The car waited at the curb. Maya slid into the back seat, and as they pulled into traffic, she caught one last glimpse of the Tribeca building in the side mirror, Dante's empire, glowing against the dark sky. Her empire now, too. She settled back into the leather seat and closed her eyes, finally at peace with who she'd become. The waitress was gone. In her place was someone new, someone dangerous, someone who belonged.